Lefties try to cancel a lefty for not being lefty enough? An autopsy 30 years in the making, plus new videos every week and over 340 exclusives in the back catalog when you support The Habit at patreon.com/doseofbuckley. We all make a mountain out of a molehill at some point in our lives. It's human nature to get pissed at something that ultimately isn't that big a deal. Someone driving too slow causes you to be like a minute later than you would have been. Or a TV show you watched for 8 years doesn't end quite the way you'd hoped. Or, I don't know, you placed 5th in a swimming race against a trans woman, but if the trans woman hadn't been in the race, you still would have placed 5th. Well, what happens when, like Riley Gaines, turning molehills into mountains becomes your entire raison d'etre? That's how you get to this story about the WNBA that you've probably heard bits and pieces about, where 2 men have declared for the WNBA draft? Well, it all started with Sophie Cunningham. You know her as the pointing woman from the meme, because you sure as fuck don't know her as bench player for the Indiana Fever. The WNBA averages 750,000 viewers a game, okay? She did an interview with ESPN last month, where she spoke out against the participation of trans women in sports. A reminder that only 1% of Americans identify as trans, and 1% of them are either interested in or good enough to play sports at any level. So let's get this out of the way early and reiterate my position. It's not that I think trans women should play women's sports. It's that I don't think it's happening at a scale that matters. That the most prominent case ever involved a trans person placing 5th, losing to 4 naturally born females, and I want to leave it up to both doctors and governing bodies to decide. Not Twitter transvestigators going, "Look at their hands," that think Zendaya is a man, baby. We live in the most brain-dead anti-science timeline where you got RFK, a man who gave himself mercury poisoning and a tapeworm that ate part of his brain, assigned as the Secretary of Health, going, "I don't think that the measles vaccine is safe." Measles was effectively gone. Not anymore. Good work, Secretary Warbles. If an actual doctor with a real medical degree says, "We've done the research, there's nothing you can do to make it a level playing ground, trans women can't play physical-based sports," I'm perfectly fine with that decision. Every trans person I've ever met doesn't even like sports anyway. They like anime and furries. They'd be more likely to want to be the mascot than to be the point guard. Anyway, Sophie doubles down, posting a picture of herself on Instagram with the caption, "I said what I said," saluting emoji. So I guess this riled up some people. As always, I've seen more articles saying that people are upset about what MAGA Barbie Sophie Cunningham said about trans women than any actual people who were upset, but I'll accept that they exist. And so, that brings us to the 2 former NBA players, and I say that very loosely about one of them, deciding to prove a point by declaring for the WNBA draft. Enes Kanter Freedom, who played 11 pretty mediocre seasons in the NBA, tweets on August 7th, after careful consideration, a lie 3 words in, and reviewing the current eligibility guidelines, "I'm officially declaring myself a WNBA prospect. If simply declaring who you are is all that's required, then I meet every single requirement necessary to compete in the WNBA. The WNBA's collective bargaining agreement simply states, only players who are women are eligible to play in the WNBA. And that rule has stood as good enough for nearly 30 years. Yeah, you'll be surprised to learn the WNBA existed before Caitlin Clark and Angel Reese. It's existed since 1997. And in that time, there has not been a single trans athlete. Not one. Oh, but what about Brittany Griner? Just shut the fuck up, you brain-dead sheep. Also, if she is trans, again, doing a bad job of proving that they're too dominant to play with the dames. She's only been the top scorer in the league twice in 12 years, and her team has only won once. So anyway, Enes posts a video of himself transitioning to the WNBA, doing these sad dumbbell curls, and posting, I have an idea. Why not just merge the NBA and WNBA? If biology doesn't matter anymore, then why have separate leagues at all? Rules are rules. Again, who says it doesn't matter? The WNBA's rule is pretty clear. Only players who are women are eligible to play in the WNBA. The WNBA has been clearly self-governing this for 30 years with no issues. And what Enes is doing is like going to a restaurant that's never had a dine and dash and saying, "Why doesn't everyone just eat here and not pay? Look, I'm gonna do it." Congrats, you proved the point that you're the only one trying to do this. Well, not the only one, because you know grifters, they don't have any creativity and love to steal other people's ideas. So, a man named Royce White, who played three games in the NBA, scoring 0 points, and had to quit because he's afraid of flying, went, "Yeah, good idea, Enes. I'm also declaring for the WNBA draft." And has since posted shit like this. "Genitalia doesn't determine gender. That's a cisnormative fallacy. My trans-affirming doctor told me that I can think of my genitalia as 9 inches of clitoris." Oh, also, he's running for president and U.S. Senate in Minnesota. In this post where he says, "Don't tell me how to be a black woman. Taking hormones are optional." This is not the case in any organization that has previously let trans women compete, by the way. You had to lower your testosterone, so no, it's not optional. "I'm an all-natural black trans lesbian with a penile aesthetic." This is fucking comedy for 12-year-old boys. You find out what a lesbian is as a preteen and go, "If I was a girl, I'd definitely be a lesbian. I like boobs too much." It's so fucking juvenile. In fact, so much so that even Enes wants to distance himself from this. "Please do not put me in the same category as other players. My goal has never been publicity, political theater, cheap attention, or stunts." Uh-oh, the ladies are fighting. But maybe this is true. Let's pretend Enes is genuine in his protest to keep trans women out of women's professional sports by being a man trying to get into women's professional sports by targeting a professional sport with 0 trans women in it. Royce White clearly just wants to be a bully. In fact, his ex-wife and son have a 50-year restraining order against him because of abuse. Royce just wants to legally be allowed to elbow women in the face and only get a foul instead of a warrant. So the WNBA held a meeting, and their stance on this was, "There are no immediate eligibility matters affecting the WNBA, and we strongly denounce the bad faith efforts to use these topics to demean or marginalize others." Which leads me back to the fact that the WNBA has never had a trans athlete, and my theories why. 1, no trans women have bothered because, like men, they don't give a fuck about women's sports either. 2, trans women have tried and failed to make teams in the past. Or 3, which is really 2B, the WNBA has quietly policed itself up to this point to weed them out. The line, "There are no immediate eligibility matters affecting the WNBA," led a bunch of morons like Ron DeSantis to parrot, "Women's sports leagues can't define what a woman is, smur." No, what that means is the rules, as written, are good enough for us and always have been. Or we handle our own fucking business. You know that tryouts aren't public, right? And if they were, holy fuck. You already don't care about the WNBA regular season. Yeah, tell me you'd watch the fucking tryouts, and I'll tell you you're a fucking liar. No, at least up until 2025, if any of those tricksy trans tried to sneak into a tryout, they were clearly dealt with. No eligibility matters immediately affecting the WNBA means all the owners got together and said, "Yeah, just don't let them in. We don't need the media hassle or to create our own Riley Gaines. Some mediocre player decides to blame trans athletes for why she was floating dog shit in the pool compared to every other female athlete." Wait, why only up until 2025, Buckley? Well, I've been waiting closer to the end of the video to drop this bombshell that I haven't seen a single fucking person talk about during this. 2 Februaries ago, the NCAA, the governing body for all college sports that actually matter, where 95% of WNBA players come from, issued a ruling that women's sports and teams are restricted to student athletes assigned female at birth only. So, the NCAA solved any eligibility problems for them. Do you think the WNBA selects players the way they select contestants for The Price is Right? Just grabbing people off the street? Hey, wanna see if you're good enough to play basketball? No, you trogs! They're high school athletes who become college athletes who become pro athletes. So, as long as they're basically only getting their athletes from the NCAA, they don't have to worry about any of this. Now, if you did go to university, can you tell me what's 1% of 1% of 5%? Because that's what we're talking about. This isn't even a mountain out of a molehill, it's the fucking Matterhorn made out of an anthill. Yeah, but what if? Yeah, what if piss came out of your eyeballs? It's not. This is the literal definition of a straw man argument. Enes Kanter Freedom and Royce White have constructed a problem that doesn't exist to argue against, to make themselves relevant in a world that couldn't give a shit about them anymore. Except in this case, they are the ones who are the scarecrows. If they only had a brain.